But before moving to the next session, let me remind you of the importance of automatic external defibrillators, AED as we call them. Dr. Kleinefeld emphasized them, but also me as a director of medical services of the Greek ambulance service, EKAV, but also as a citizen who has been trained in CPR. I carry an AED in my car trunk at all times. Gary has seen it and made a joke about it, but it's not a joke. I feel that I should make a difference by carrying this AED, because if you don't have it, then nothing can replace that. And EENA has been doing a lot of work to raise the importance of having AEDs mapped across Europe, and that this mapping data is available in 112 emergency communication centers. Currently, the majority of European public service answering point, PSAPs, do not have access to such data. How can we have AEDs used if we don't know where they are, is the question that we're faced. Please join us at EENA in making it a priority next years about mapping AEDs all over Europe, and that PSAPs know where those AEDs are. After this, after the mapping, I hope to fulfill one of my dreams. A dream that says that every automatic external defibrillator should have some sort of a beacon, like the Lost My Phone app or something like that, that we could locate every AED using our phone, and then being able not to have to do the mapping, but picking up a device, our device, and then locating the AED, and then go right there, open the door, and getting it. But maybe I'm getting carried away, and I don't want to dwell too much on it. But again, if something that we need to take away from this presentation, training, and have an AED standby, know where the closest AED is, and use it. Thank you for this. Now, another great story, sad story, but great story. Next speaker is someone who also knows a lot about AEDs, but this is not what we're going to talk about. My dear friend and colleague, Dr. Nagi Souaiby, will share with us the extraordinary emergency medical response to the terrible explosion which took place in 2020 in Beirut. Dr. Nagi Souaiby, please join us on stage. Oh, he's there. Good. Excellent. Hi. Great to see you here. Pleasure. Now, on August 4th, 2020, an explosion of unprecedented magnitude hit the port of Beirut in Lebanon. It hit the port of Beirut and its surrounding, causing 218 deaths, over 7,000 injuries, and important material damages in the city. Hospitals, which were themselves severely damaged, saw a quick influx of victims to treat, and these victims needed urgent treatment. In this keynote presentation, we will hear how the extraordinary emergency medical response worked in this unprecedented crisis and how it was all set up. Dr. Souaiby, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, good morning, everybody. Bonjour. Bonjour, Marseille. When I came in France 40 years ago to start my medical school in Montpellier at 150 kilometers from there, I arrived first in Marseille. So Marseille is my first French souvenir, and I really love this city and the region. I'm very happy to be with you today, even if I have to share not one of the most painful experience I lived as Lebanese citizen and as emergency doctor as well. If you can start with the presentation.
Yes, can we have the first video, please?
Can we start with the first? We have two short videos, and I will start my presentation later, please.
Just after 6 p.m. local time on Tuesday, the 4th of August, an explosion ripped through Beirut's port. people in Lebanon's capital had earlier spotted a large fire at the port, billowing dark smoke into the air. There were reports that a warehouse containing fireworks had caught fire. And several videos of the scene showed colored flashes in the flames. Videos from the scene suggest there was one smaller explosion. And then roughly 30 seconds later, this enormous shock. The blast struck with the force of a 3.5 magnitude earthquake. This was the aftermath. Windows shattered in buildings across the city and damaged cars on the roads near the port. This is where the explosion happened. 4 kilometers away, in the St. Mar Meroun church, a priest and his congregation were taking part in Mass. The explosion was caught on camera 11 kilometers away in the Dabia Marina. The blast was so big that it was heard from the mountains. This video from the town of Brumana, 15 kilometers away, shows how far the shockwave reached. It was even heard and felt as far away as Cyprus, more than 125 miles across the Mediterranean. Aerial shots show the scale of the destruction of the port. It reportedly housed 85% of Lebanon's supply of grain, which was a strategic food reserve in a country crippled by economic meltdown. You can see the impact on the Beirut port silos building before and after the explosion. Surrounding the silos were corrugated iron and steel structures that have mostly been destroyed. These satellite images reveal the extent of the damage. This crater was once a warehouse. Now it's underwater. The colossal force was caused by the explosion of 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, a highly reactive chemical which was being stored unsafely in a hangar on the port. Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab has promised that those responsible for the catastrophe will pay the price.
Should we see the next video straight away?
Yes, I prefer to see the next.
Can we have the second video, please?
The next one is in a hospital.
This is the helipad on the top of the St. George's Hospital in Beirut. The time is just after 6 on an uneventful Tuesday evening. And 1 week on, although you know what's coming next, it is still shocking. Down below, the hospital's other 230 closed-circuit cameras captured the chaos. It's the first time this footage has ever been shown. In the postnatal ward, a nurse hears what was the first small explosion. She's curious before realizing something terrible is happening. Disoriented, she gets to her feet and rushes to the babies in her care. Off camera, she takes them to safety.
The babies were right here.
Nurse Pamela Zenoun was in the ward above, the neonatal intensive care unit. They treat premature babies. This video shows her working just moments before the blast. She feels the first tremor, and then the room collapses. Smoke, rubble, and fear. Amazingly, Pamela was barely scratched, but what happened after she fought her way out of the wreckage is truly astonishing.
The other nurses were very badly
They
injured?
were very badly injured. They were all bleeding. They were standing over there. And they looked at me, and I looked at them. I started to scream, what happened? They just looked at me this way and looked at each other. And they were all bleeding. They couldn't even talk. All the ceiling was on the floor. I grabbed the ceilings with my hands and tried to pull them away just to know where the babies were, because the incubators moved. They weren't on the same place. I held the 3 babies and went through this door. We needed to go to the exit. We couldn't find the exit. We're used that the exit was on our left side. Now there's nothing on our left side. I walked around 5 kilometers on the street so I could get the babies to another hospital.
But you saved them. You saved everybody. Wow.
Much of the hospital was wrecked. 17 people were killed, nurses, patients, and visitors amongst the victims. But when you see this footage, it's a miracle the loss of life wasn't greater. In the main lobby, people scatter, and then a blast wave of glass, splintered wood, and concrete.
So it kind of blew inside, and it hit me on the side of my face.
Professor Georges Juvelekian was in his clinic at the time. He told me he'd just finished a consultation.
Had my colleague not picked me up from here, I could have bled to death. Who knows? We should be proud of what we've done. What this hospital did in 8 hours, evacuating over 300 patients to safety, despite the lack of power and glass everywhere and unsafe environment and no resources, is a miracle by itself and speaks to the greatness of this people.
Many of the cameras around the hospital stutter in the aftermath. But despite the glitching, they still record a city in panic and shock. A few minutes after the explosion, injured people from across the neighborhood are running to the medical center for help, not knowing that it had also become a casualty.
Never throughout its history was it shut down completely like it is right now. So it's incumbent upon us all to get it restarted. This is a message that I cannot overemphasize. This is who we are.
Across Beirut, you can find many stories of heroism and bravery. But this is a place where the disease of corruption never allowed a healthy state to grow. And as it remembers its victims, the challenges of mending this fractured city, its politics and economy, will take years to overcome. Alex Rossi, Sky News, Beirut.
So I estimate that it's very important to start with these 2 short videos, which speak for themselves, and to introduce the context. Allow me to thank the organizers for inviting me. I'm very pleased and honored to be with you today. So I am an emergency forensic doctor, graduated from Montpellier and specialized from Paris University. I am currently professor at St. Joseph University in Beirut, which is a French university. And I am head of the emergency department at Notre Dame Maritime Hospital, located 40 kilometers north to Beirut. And I am the chief editor of the Mediterranean Journal of Emergency Medicine, and I have no conflict of interest for this presentation. During this presentation, I will talk a little bit about the Lebanese context, some data about the blast with some photos, and I will talk about some of the challenges we faced, namely the triage, dispatching, the victim identification process, the needs assessments, and the mental health issues. First, why Lebanon is a country of paradoxes. Lebanon, in its actual border and actual constitution as a republic, date back 100 years ago, which is a very young country. But Lebanon as an entity has existed since the dawn of time and was cited more than 10 times in the Bible. It's a small country, like one French department, and is a mixage of 18 religious community. That's why Lebanon has always lived at the rhythm of war and a crisis, despite some golden age time like the 60s and the 50s of the last century. Economically, and till 2019, Lebanon was an upper middle income country, but since 2019, we are facing a very huge economic crisis. And there is a paradox in Lebanon between the private sector and the public sector health-wise. So we have a very strong private sector. We have some hospitals like Clemenceau Medical Center always rated among top 10 worldwide. And we have a very weak and underfunded public sector. So the pre-hospital emergency services are suffering because, as you may know, pre-hospital emergency services are in the sphere of the public sector. Lebanon was always named as the hospital of the Middle East, but now we are facing a lot of problems. As for the pre-hospital care and first aid, it is the Lebanese Red Cross mainly. We don't have any medical regulation like here in France, and we adopt what we call the scoop and run approach. So what happened this 4 of August? In a 200-meter, 50 meters shed were stored fireworks, tires, and ammonium nitrate. I'm not an explosive expert, but I learned that the smoke, the white smoke is fireworks, the black smoke is tires, and the purple or red smoke is ammonium nitrate. Here is the location, the crater left behind, and just behind you can see a building in concrete, which is the wet storage silos built in 1968, which protect a large part, the west part of the capital. All the port was destroyed. Nearby the explosion, we have the headquarters of the Lebanese Red Cross with all their material losses, so it was very difficult for the pre-hospital emergency services to intervene rapidly. This photo has been around the world and shows the full extent of the drama. Even so, the professional healthcare workers were well equipped, but people who came to help worked barehanded and without any protections. We evacuated people as we can. Here we put 3 injured people in an ambulance of the Lebanese Red Cross. One of the ambulances was the help of the Lebanese army. The Lebanese context is very particular. The Lebanese army is omnipresent everywhere, which is not the case in Europe. It is a good thing for maintaining security, but it can delay sometime the first aid. Here, the nearest district of Gemmaise, which is a very frequented region by young people and with old houses. It's completely desolation and destruction. Here at St. George University Hospital, we can see one dead person in his bed in a completely blown out room. in the same floor, another patient trying to get out with the help of practical nurse and people there. Another very telling photo, this lady with his look, who said a lot, and the healthcare workers, paramedics reaching out to her, trying to help, putting a bandage on her shoulder. The very telling photo about the drama. Some photos from one of the hospitals, it's Hôtel Dieu de France, the first hospital who receives the most important volume of people. It's the first minutes of when the people started to arrive to the emergency room. Here, outside the emergency department at St. George University Hospital, because at St. George it was the first hospital after the port and was completely unoperational, completely destroyed. So physicians and nurses were obliged to treat people outside the emergency department, outside the hospital. And they use torch and they use their smartphone to see. Here, it's the main area of the emergency department at Hôtel Dieu de France. It's not fiction, it's a real photo, okay, to give you an idea about the volume of the number of victims received in this hospital received about 700 injuries in less than 3 hours. In the city, 10 kilometers around, it was complete desolation. People who were not injured started to search their relatives. It's inside of nowhere. All the cities, all the east part of the cities is like this photo. But this photo date 2 days after the blast. You can see people, resilient people, Lebanese people, who came to help, to clean, to offer help, social help, foods, and support to the inhabitants of Beirut. As for disaster impact, you know, on the graph, in less than 3 hours, we received 3 more people than we received in 24 hours in all Lebanese hospitals. So were involved 39 hospitals in which were admitted more than 5,500. It's a number declared by the Ministry of Public Health 48 hours after the blast. Now we reached a number of 7,000, okay? And as I speak to you, I learned that the last victim died yesterday, so we continue to lose people from this blast. So in Beirut, 1/3 of injured people were in Beirut, and the 2/3 outside of Beirut. As we don't have any regulation, the EMS or pre-hospital EMS were completely in chaos. So people try to help each other, and we discovered the fascination of the WhatsApp, because the WhatsApp groups created help a lot to know where to go, which hospital is able to receive, but because some hospitals started to close their doors because they didn't have any possibility to accept more patients. Damages to hospitals were really huge. I will talk about later on. And the report of the Ministry of Public Health 2 days later shows more than 4,600 injuries discharged the same night from ED. 830 admitted to regular floors. Patient admitted to ICU, 107, and total number of deceased the same night declared by the ED, 104. Most of them in the first minute after the admission to the ED, which means that the triage operation worked well, and we didn't deplore any deceased person after the admission. So this is the hand of a friend of mine from my hometown village who received more than 500 stitches in her body. And first data shows, as scroll down, numbers are appearing in the screen. The critical care admission, we have cerebral contusion or hemorrhage mainly, but also lung injuries, polytrauma, and people who undergone surgeries. It was mainly upper and lower extremities, but also tendon repairs, open eyes injuries, a lot of eye injuries, craniotomy, polytrauma, and plastic repair. So what were the challenges for us? I will speak about 3 groups of them. First, the dispatching, transportation, and triage, the disaster victim identification process, and finally, the evaluation and the need assessment. This is a classical diagram that if you are a specialist in disaster medicine, you may know how to build an emergency contingency plan, a pre-hospital one, when you have an event. Okay, the first team who arrive on the scene will secure an exclusion area, a controlled area, and a security perimeter in which you can set a zone for triage, zone for evacuation. If needed, depending on the geographic situation, you can implement a field hospital and organize the evacuation to the other hospitals and an area to treat people, implicated people with psychological problem. We all learned that we have to skip the closed hospitals because by ambulances, because this ambulance will be reached by walked wounded. But in this situation, as you saw in the videos, the event was over all the city. So the classical schema is not operational. So triage and this classical plan is not operational at all. So any pre-hospital triage is usefulness in these cases. Even transfer by helicopter was not operational because the only helipad we have at St. George University was damaged also. So the classical start triage method you should forget about in this case. So how to overcome this problem? We reinforced the in-hospital triage because the pre-hospital triage was not operational. So the first hour, it was total chaos, but emergency departments, teams started to be organized after the first hour, and we implement a double triage with nurse and physician. Besides that, we implement a retriage inside each area. So we put a nurse and an emergency physician at the entrance of the emergency room, and they directed people to areas, red areas, green areas, and yellow areas. First emergency, second emergency, third emergency, and non-injured people, which were representing more than the half. And then the operation started to be more organized. And here you can see some explicit photos, okay? Pardon, how to come back? Okay. Practical nurse helping people to reach the area. Here, a physician treating patient with the light of the smartphone. Here, the ophthalmological area, because we had a lot of eye injuries. So the first hour was complete chaos, and then we started to be well organized. The second challenge was the identification process. As you may know, DVI is something who must be led by senior expert and very well-trained people. It's also a social, cultural, and a duty of the community. So how to identify that body, and we faced a lot of problem with that. The two main things I would like to stress on are to be able to make a positive identification. It's very difficult to make negative identification. I mean, we should not tell people or parents, it's go inside and see if your relative or your son or your daughter is inside. We should be able to give positive identification. Positive identification is based on work of experts doing pre and post-mortem matching, pre-mortem data collected by healthcare workers, and post-mortem data collected by forensic team. And matching that, doing some searching for some evidence, like primary evidence, like DNA, like digital imprint, like teeth, like prosthesis, and matching them with some secondary evidence like passport, watches, any other things, and giving people a certitude of identification, I mean positive identification. It's very important, and we face a lot of problem with that. We had, for this purpose, the help of the ICRC, which is very dynamic and active in Lebanon. The third kind of challenges was to evaluate and to make a need assessment. For example, how to evaluate losses of materials. For this purpose, I was the lead of 8 expert team designated by the WHO, and we used for this what we call the post-disaster rapid hospital assessment developed by WHO. It is a 3 components assessment: non-structural, led by people working in the healthcare sector; functional capacity, led by physicians and nurses; and structural, led by architect and engineer. And we issued what we call an immediate action, conclusion to take immediate action in order to estimate the cost and to start with priorities. As for the personnel, we regretfully lost 6 of our RNs, 4 of them from St. George University Hospital, 4 of them from St. George University Hospital. And here, my close friend, George Velikian, head of the ICU division, was severely injured. More than 180 healthcare professionals were injured, among them 68 doctors and residents. Another challenge was how to do with the chronic diseases patient, like kidney dialysis patient, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy. So good networking was built, and solidarity between hospitals was operational, and all people in St. George and the other hospitals completely destroyed besides the port were dispatched in the other hospitals, and the next day they pursued their treatment with their medical and nursing staff in other hospitals. As for COVID-19, 1st of July to 2020, we reached almost 0 cases, and we keep this balance till the 4th of August, despite the opening of the airport. And you can see on the graph that after the 4th of August, it was increasing number of COVID cases. Last but not least, the mental health issues. After the blast, we created, with the help of the WHO and the Ministry of Public Health, a mental health national program to help healthcare professionals and to help people suffering from injuries. And I cannot but emphasize on the importance of training your teams on PFA, psychological first aid, because it's very helpful. Every emergency workers, beside its capacitation in ALS, ACLS, BLS, should be aware about the psychological first aid, which can be resumed on 3L: look, listen, and link. Look to understand what's happening. Listen to take the message from the patient or to have an idea about the needs, and link to make the necessary for them to give the right answer. Finally, the lesson learned. August 4 was beyond any emergency contingency plan, but being prepared to a disaster is like being prepared to any other. And here I can join my friend Demetrios. Training is very important. There's an English proverb who say, training them before blaming them. So even in this kind of disasters, training and a plan is very necessary. Second point, the solidarity and good networking is crucial. And last, international aid is very important, but don't allow on international aid the first day, okay? Because any international aid needs more than 48 hours to be implemented. Remember that Plan B may not be always functional. Here in St. George University, 14 elevators over 14 was non-functional, okay? No power generator functional, no water, no electricity. So Plan B, be careful. And for the pre-hospital emergency services as well. Last but not least, here is a photo of our friends from Moroccan field hospital who stay for 1 month after the blast, giving services for more than 100 people a day. It was a really amazing work from them. Last but not least, my team at Notre Dame Maritime Hospital, the ICU team and the emergency team. And I would like to say that Byblos is, where I am from, is the oldest city worldwide continuously inhabited. And this is Alexandra, the youngest victim of Beirut blast. And here you can say Jerusalem's wet near the, in place of the explosion, a sign of hope. Excuse me for my pronunciation, because at each time I give this presentation, the emotion take the power on me, and it's very difficult to present this presentation, even if I already presented it for many times. I would like to thank you, and I will be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have time for one question from the audience, if anybody wants to ask Dr. Souaiby something. Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for the excellent presentation. Good.